Okay, I will start us off today. I think I'm the only one with access to this slide deck, but welcome on. Here we are, February the 4th, with our next culture chat. This is Trainer Modalities in the IC training rooms, the Intercultural training room. For those of you that have worked with the Institute before, certainly our Crossing Cultures with Competence is all about trainer development for people working in the intercultural space, and the ITEC is also a certification for intercultural trainers. So when Sharon come to us with this topic, we thought, great, this is certainly something we are super interested in, and we know the rest of the community will be as well. We are on a good run of culture chats now, I think all the way through till the end of July. So every 2 weeks, so 18th, 4th, 18th, and 1st. We've got some great topics coming up over the next few months. So please mark it in your calendar. Again, of course, we love people to come forward with ideas for culture chat. We think this is a great space for us all to learn in a kind and informal environment. So semi worked out ideas or fully scoped ideas are all welcome. Just reach out to either Tasha, Terry, Nick, myself, or just info at email at Interchange Institute. We send you a Google Doc, fill in the details, and we get you scheduled in. So please feel free to reach out. Our Crossing Culture with Competence program, we've had to move the dates of our February training, which was starting next week or this week, back to the 20th, but you can still join that if you wish. We're currently finalizing our first in-person of the year, which will be in New York in April, and then another online for May. So again, just reach out if that's something you wish to know more about. For those of you that have already done CCWC, of course, get in contact regarding the level 2 or the enhanced level with the business communications and family transition elements. We do those ad hoc throughout the year. So just get in contact and we'll try and put you in a group. For those of you working on your ITEC submission, submission deadline is always the 1st of each month. So you've already missed this one. I should have updated this slide, but next one will be March 1st. But of course, 11 opportunities to submit throughout the year. The culture chat, we for those of you that can't make it or wish to catch up on some topic areas, they are recorded and then we put them onto our YouTube channel. Of course, the joy of culture chat is us all interacting and the small group breakouts. That's the focus. So it's not the most interesting YouTube video you ever watched, but still it's a great way of at least catching up on the topic we discussed. You just miss out on the interaction in the breakout rooms. What we're doing, we're currently in the process of recording some longer format podcasts with many of the hosts that also do the culture chats. So they're all going to be kind of drip released as well later this year. So a longer format of the topic and a bit more about the speaker in those podcasts as well. So I welcome you to our guest today. Sharon, she just told me this. I'm saying Nokparat, which I think is an okay. I'm going to give myself a solid 6 out of 10 for that pronunciation. Whether Sharon feels the same, I do not know. But for those of you that don't know Sharon, she works in the global training department or functionality of training courses for Server. I've only recently stopped calling Sharon and many of our colleagues at Server employees of BGRS, which of course in my mind it always was, but it took me a good 12 months to get BGRS out of my brain and of course use the correct terminology of Server. But for any of you that have worked with them in the past or have not, very influential in the global mobility market in terms of training and relocation, etc., etc. So please feel free to look them up at server.com. I will now get out of the way and pass you over to Sharon. So let me stop sharing my screen. Sharon, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Peter. It's just a pleasure to be here today. And I am partially revising a talk that I did many years ago at CITAR, but also I'm going to add in a little hook around AI because, things are changing and life moves on and we have to keep up with the times. And so I think we've got a lot of things that are kind of questioning us as we go into do intercultural training, facilitation, all the different offshoots of enhancing intercultural skills. So I thought this would be a great place to talk a little bit about kind of who we are and the modalities that we use as trainers. So I was a trainer for about 10 years before I came here to Serva, where I've been here now. I've been through, Peter, I have to laugh. You're just getting used to calling us Serva from BGRS. Prior to that, we were Brookfield, and prior to that, we were Prudential. So like sometimes I even go in the Wayback Machine and I forget, who I'm with. But, as we're going through all these iterations, it's a good chance to kind of check in and see where we're at. So just I want people to feel free to keep their keep your mics open. I want things to be really interactive. We are going to have a breakout session fairly early on, but then also to use the chat as well. And I'm going to see if I can get that up here for me. Maybe I can't. That's all right. So I'll ask you, it looks like I've locked down my screen. So I'll just ask you to keep an eye on the chat in case something really good and juicy comes up, but don't be afraid to come off mute and talk. So we're going to just talk first about trainer modalities. And this is what I presented years ago at CITAR and kind of came up with so what is it that we actually do? And what are the skills that we as interculturalists need when we're training and teaching and interacting and trying to help others become very competent globally and those skills that they need. And I thought, we do an awful lot in the training room. It's not just one thing. And I think actually even more so now as we start to look in this much more enhanced technology enabled AI, kind of coming in on us. There's just so many more things that we are doing in the training room. But I do think, coaching is huge. I find that typically once I get through basic content, which I might put in sort of that training teaching area of a trainer modality, that hat that we're wearing, I get very quickly into coaching. Sometimes that depends a little bit on who is in the training room, how receptive are they to this learning. For example, at Serva, because we're working with corporate employees, we have people that come into the training room who don't want to be there. They don't have time. They are, they think, well, I've traveled to that place before. That's good enough. I've picked up some things just because I'm going there now to live. I think I can transfer some of those things that I got from, taking a cab from the airport to the hotel to the office and back again. Sure, I've got it all, right? Sometimes they're just very hostile. They're upset about maybe the assignment or the travel they have to take, the disruption to their family. And so the last thing that they want to do is be in a training room and talk about those things. And so then, we're kind of caught in between that. Okay, so we're trying to teach you, we're trying to be helpful. We want you to be successful. I think that's why all of us got into this. We saw that people need help in working across cultures in whatever way they're doing that. And so we know that we have some skills and some abilities that can help people with that, and we want to impart that on them, so that they can experience the richness that we experience because we are open to all of that. And so, we sometimes are playing around the edges of, okay, we've done some training, we've imparted some knowledge, now we have to help folks get to use that knowledge. So we might play those edges of sort of coaching. If we have some similar experiences, we might be mentoring a little bit. A lot of times when we've got that kind of hostile thing going on in the training room, or just, they're just a little annoyed at having to take this time out or whatever it might be, we might need to just kind of guide them a little bit. And I always sort of think in my mind that the metaphor of when I'm guiding someone who's maybe a little hesitant, it's almost like, yeah, that the infamous, I can lead this horse to water, but I can't make him or her drink. Right. So I'm trying to get them there. I'm trying to get them to drink, and I'm trying to guide them and help them see why this is important and what an impact it might make, for them, for their success, for their happiness, for their well-being, all of those different kinds of things. And then oftentimes too, right, we're a facilitator. We're helping navigate, whatever might be going on in the training room or might be happening within their business scenario. My very first training that I co-trained way back in the day, I had a spouse who really did not want to go on assignment. And that's when I really became that facilitator. Like, let's open up the conversation, but let's keep that conversation in an area that is safe but open, and people can express themselves, and will facilitate and maybe sometimes even interpret or extrapolate what they're saying into some more positive language. And when I look at that and I start talking about those things, it never ceases to amaze me at just how many skills we as interculturalists need to bring into the training room. So having said that, I want to open this up a little bit and just get your feedback. Do you think this list is complete? Are there things here that you disagree with? I'm just curious to hear people's reactions and responses.
Did you want to just give a half a sentence discriminatory separating of the 6 categories as you see them, or?
Sure, if that's helpful. Yeah. So I think of coaching more in the sort of modern coaching terminology, right? Where we have certifications in different types of coaching. That you might be a fitness coach, or you might be a wellness coach. You might be a solutions focused coach. You might have done some other type of training and certification in that coaching as a way to help people in different settings to go to achieve certain accomplishments. Training, I think of in that traditional way of, we're trying to train people in skills, to build skills, and maybe scenarios that might help them employ those skills. Teaching, I think of as really knowledge transfer. So when I think of teaching, I think of, China is a country of more than 1 billion people. It has, hard facts, right? That kind of thing. Mentoring, trying to meet someone a little bit more where they're at, trying to I don't want to say be a friend, right? But there is something friendly in mentoring that I understand as someone who's maybe gone before and experienced what I can kind of see and help you with, what to look out for. Guiding is, for me, the guiding is that one of, I've almost got someone who's difficult or hesitant, and I need to get them, I know I need to get them from point A to point B, and I need to find a way to help them get there and embrace point B because it's really for their own good. maybe there's an analogy in being a parent there, I'm not sure. And then a facilitator, right? That's kind of almost that a person who's taking information from all the constituents in the room and really kind of interpreting, what's going on. Is that helpful? Yeah. Other thoughts from anyone else? I think I can pull the chat up over here on my side thing here. Oh, there we go. Relationship coach. Yeah. Sadly, sometimes a trainer also needs to be an IT support person. Oh, yeah.
I had a quick thought on this. One of the things that I was pondering while you were going through the different categories was um, it's also really useful to point out where's the dividing line between coaching and training? Like what separates them? Because you could compare two, one or two or three of those and then say, oh, those are all they all have a lot of overlap within a particular area, but here's where they differentiate. This is what makes coaching stand out from training, or teaching stand out from mentoring or something like that. Because I think that's also really good awareness, just awareness practice as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Eric. And I do think, yes, there are certainly overlaps between all of these categories. I think one of the things that when I originally put this together, it was kind of a roadmap for all of us in the profession to think about just how much we actually do. Right. Because it's really kind of amazing when you think about everything that has to happen in a training room and the scenarios that you get faced with. One of my favorites, well, I don't know if it's a favorite story, but one of the things that often happens in the training room is you get surprised by something that didn't come up in a needs assessment. And so now you've been, and I'm going to get to these comments in the chat because it's really good about therapy and mediation and that. I think that those are maybe things that we should think about adding here. But so, for example, I went into a training room and had a wonderful couple I was working with. The wife was being promoted, being sent to France. Her husband was coming along. They had two beautiful children. We're super excited. I mean, who wouldn't be excited about going to France? And at lunchtime, as the husband had stepped away for a little bit, the wife said to me, Sharon, you need to know my husband is an alcoholic. And I don't know what we're going to do in France because of the drinking culture. And so that was a surprise. And it sort of turns the training on its head. And, here she's saying this to me while he's out of the room. So am I supposed to hold that in confidence? Am I supposed to talk about that? What am I supposed to do with that? And that's a tricky position to be put in. But I think so often as interculturalists, we are entering into those spaces where something unexpected happens. And we have to sort of rely on all the skills that we've honed that we might be able to put into some of these buckets and come up with some new skills on the fly and really be able to, dance in that moment. That story had a really happy ending. I just said, does he know you're going to tell me this? And she said, oh, we can talk about it. Oh, thank God. Right. So I was just, delighted from that perspective that, okay, this isn't some big secret now that I'm privy to. Now we can really kind of talk about things and we can really unpack what's going on here. Like, what is it that you need? And really what they needed was, some skills, some suggestions, some places to look at, resources to look at for how he could manage his disease while he was on assignment. And he certainly had grown a lot of those skills already. He just didn't know how to find them in France. Right. So that has a very happy ending. But it kind of goes in with what I'm seeing a little bit in the chat here about mediation and therapy. So let me take the therapy piece first, because I'm obviously very passionate about this, and I'm sure anybody else who's here probably feels the same way that I do. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not a trained therapist. I don't have that background. I would, probably if I were to pick up a second career, that might be something that I would do, because I am very passionate about how people work, what makes them tick, where there are struggles, how we can help. Those are all topics that fascinate me. But as an interculturalist without a therapist background, I can do more harm than good, really. So I have to be really careful that I don't cross into that. And there are times in the training room, right, where you might need to say, look, you know what? And I'm sure this has come up, and I'm pretty sure I've had this conversation with Terry, like, hey, your company provides, an EAP for you to be able to access. This sounds like something that you could really use some help from a professional in that therapy space with. And, you just need to look that up on your intranet, and we can be the facilitator sometimes for getting people that extra bit of help that they might need. And so I think that's a really important place to, for us as interculturalists, unless we have that background. But even if we have that background, if we are in the training room as an interculturalist, we have to be really careful, right, about how we employ that skill and not open things up that, aren't going to get resolved in a day, and make sure that we're providing people or pointing people towards those resources. I think the other thing that what really is interesting to me is, let's see, Claire, you put in here mediation, and I'd love to open, if you don't mind, taking yourself off mute and talking about that a little bit more. Why mediation? What brought that to your mind?
Sure. So I have spent the last several years training on gender norms in the military. So I work domestically, training U.S. military personnel, and also internationally with U.S. and foreign partners in the room together on gender norms. And I have found that sometimes when I'm presenting information and even engaging them in small group discussions, that differential understandings or ideas about gender norms as pertain to the military can kind of derail or just interrupt. It's a surprise. And I just wondered if that has been a factor that you've seen in terms of, like, within the student cohort, there's a dynamic or some longstanding unspoken conflict within the group that you end up kind of engaging in, and what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So first of all, thank you for the work that you do. I can't even imagine how difficult that is. And so I'm sure you have some crazy mad skills to be doing that kind of work, and it's really important. What I see an awful lot in training, kind of two things, right? You've got maybe you've got a couple that's going on assignment, and one of them's pretty darn unhappy about it for whatever reason, right? It's disruption to the family, or it's disruption to that person's career. Even though they may have agreed to all of this, they're still not happy about it, and they haven't moved to a point where they can put aside some of that anger, frustration. And so it's coming out in hostilities. And, I can tell you, a few of those kind of little war stories, so to speak. One couple that the woman was getting a promotion to go overseas, and her husband worked for the same company. And they said, yeah, sure, you can do your job from China with her. And they were kind of a closed couple to begin with. There wasn't, it was kind of hard to kind of break through the shell a little bit. And finally, at one point, we were talking about their kids, and they had kids that were staying behind, kids that were coming with them. There was all kinds of dynamics going on. And she just, sort of looked at him, and she said, I want to know why we always do things the hard way. And I went, whoa, valid. That's a really valid point that she had. But that coming out, in an intercultural training room, that is sort of almost a mediation. And, certainly I'm no mediator, but, dealing with intercultural conflict is certainly something that we see a lot. We also see that a lot, for example, in group training programs, where you're either maybe trying to create a new corporate culture, maybe you're going through a merger acquisition, and so you've got leadership from both sides, and they're really kind of fighting it out for whose value is going to prevail in the new setting, or maybe it's in a group training where you're trying to meet certain expectations, and you've got performers and underperformers, and there becomes an us them conflict, and you've got to navigate that through a cultural lens, because what is success in one culture is not success in the other culture, and how do you bring those two sides together to get them to understand? So that's certainly something that I think is very much a part of what happens in that training room. So I love those comments and very helpful. I'm just looking in the chat here. COVID moved and families signed up for the type of move when the situation changed and families were separated. Yeah, brought up different dynamics and feelings of stress and resentment and role changes. Yeah, boy, COVID really threw a wrench into everything, didn't it? So that was a tricky time, and many more things to to have to navigate for people. The same dynamic within an intercultural marriage with move. Yes, 100%. Right. And so, these are things too, I think, that many of us have experience with. We just haven't had to think about them in terms of a modality, right? And switching between as things come up. And so I think, part of this was, I was kind of looking for a way to help explain for all of us and for our clients, kind of what we have to bring to the training room in order to be successful. It's no small task. So thank you for all of your comments and thoughts there. I'm going to go on to just a few quick questions, and then just mindful of time, within 5 minutes or so, to break into breakout rooms. But a few more questions here that I'll just pop up on the screen. So for those of you who are already practitioners in the intercultural space, what's the most common modality? I'm curious if you just want to come off mute or put something in the chat. What do you usually find your default method to be? Coaching? Yeah. Training and teaching? Yeah. Facilitator? Training, teaching? Yeah. Yeah. Training, teaching, coaching. Yeah. I think, some of it certainly depends on who our cohort in the training room is, right? So if you've got some really experienced, global, competent folks, you might be doing almost more coaching. But if you've got maybe some newbies, there may be a little bit more in the training, teaching. So, and Terry, I see you have your hand up.
I do. Man, oh, I am not on. One thing that I think comes to mind for me that I've noticed is I think sometimes a lot of people want to go right into coaching a client. And I think you made something that really hit me, is sometimes it's important as trainers that we give context or definition to things, especially when something's new. And you mentioned something. So a lot of times when I'm mentoring trainers, I'm always, or I'm looking over the materials and I'm reviewing them, I will say, this is great. This is great stuff, but you haven't given context of what this idea means. Like give context to the person, then go into coaching, then go into strategizing, for the person. But sometimes, you have to define these ideas. Like, for example, maybe global agility. So you throw this out there to a person, but what does it really mean?
Right.
So that they can grab onto it and then coach them through it. So I think sometimes trainers love, like you might love one modality of something, but then you forget to put on your other hat and say, okay, I need context. I need definition. Okay, do a little bit of that and then go into this. So I think this idea of flexibility in us is really important, so that, we don't want to be lecturing all the time. Of course not. We don't want one modality, but sometimes it is important to put on that trainer hat and do the defining, right? And then go into that other mode. So I think this idea of being very flexible, looking at the situation, is really, really important. And I love, one thing I do love about Serva is they're constantly looking at, and I say this complimentary, you're constantly looking at, what does that person need? And right, we have the field has changed so much. Sharon, you and I talk about it all the time. We're not just meeting a person who's first time going to China. We're meeting people, this is their fifth move, right? And you just can't take the same approach, right? They have all these different things that they're looking at. And so I think I put in the chat there too, is like, this is why I love introductory calls. And, look at their needs assessment, then have a call with them. You will pick out some of these little issues that are going on, and it may change your entire approach of what you're going to prepare for them. And I've seen some disasters happen where, someone walks in the room totally prepared for this sort of hat that they're going to put on, and then they're totally surprised and maybe not prepared. And so I think the more and more in this field, it gets more and more important to look at, what modality do you need to walk in with? And like, I think what you're encouraging people is be willing to have flexibility in that, right?
Yeah, 100%. You're absolutely right. And I do think, yes, it is much more complex. We have much more complex experience in front of us in the training room. And so we've got to be aware of that. And I think the other thing that really struck a chord with me that you said, Terry, is, obviously we know this, context matters. But we sometimes forget as interculturalists what the context is that we have to explain. And, in a world that's a little unsettled at the moment, to put it lightly, if we don't give that context, boy, do we get, I'll put it this way, we get blowback, and it comes fast and hard, and we really lose credibility very quickly when that happens. And so we have to be, I think, very methodical about telling someone in front of us what the context is, and why we're doing that. It's so important. So there's a hot tip for all of us to remember, myself, even after 25 years in the field, right? I still have to remind myself that.
Oh yes.
Ooh, here's an interesting question. Well, I love, first of all, Kathy, thank you so much for your comment here about various modalities as a weave. I think you're absolutely right. I always use this metaphor in my mind of dancing in the moment, right? Like, I'm going along in an Irish jig, and whoa, and now I've got to be doing, the samba or, something else, right? I've got to be able to turn, quickly and read the room quickly. And I love Hannah's comment about the biggest lessons learned from seasoned trainers. I think that's a whole topic in and of itself. A great question. So I'm going to move us along though, and actually let me ask this question. Is there a modality that we've talked about that you struggle with? Is there something that people find difficult? All of it, none of it. Facilitating in a large group, yes. Camilla, that takes great different skills from that one-on-one, definitely. Because you've got to be able to command a room. You've got to figure out who your heckler is going to be, because there's always one who's going to be disruptive and going to try and command the room positively or negatively, right? So you've got to be able to manage to that. You've got to be able to bring people together. It's got to flow. I think large groups can be very challenging. But then there's others of us who might feel like that one-on-one feels just too hard. It's not a comfortable place. So yeah, there could be challenges both ways. Is there a modality that encompasses staying pleasant when your client says something that you find abhorrent? Yeah, that's, I think that's an interesting one, Patty. I think that my take there is how do we take that and say, oh, that's a very interesting point. What kind of response do you get to that typically? Maybe kind of just asking a very open and incredibly curious question, right? I think, we all love to be heard. And so if we can take something that someone said that we're just like, wow, that no, that's just not okay. But we have to put on a little bit of a mask and not let that come into the training room and explore that with them. That's kind of a suggestion there. Oh, Samar, I love the seasoned clients who think they know it all and they're coming to the Arab world. Yeah, I know, right? We've all seen that. I mean, I am incredibly humbled constantly because, 25 years in this industry and every day is a new day. I mean, and I think that is so important, for us, but also for the people that we're working with, right? We always have something to learn. It's so fascinating. Setting boundaries on trainers. There we go. We'll make a list for for upcoming talks here. So, all right. So I want to move us now because as we talked a little bit about, these are some modalities that we might employ, some things that are missing there. Let's take it now and think about, now our challenge. We've mentioned this complexity around who's sitting in front of us and the experiences that they've already had, and how do we work with that and bring something new, bring something positive, bring in some tools that they may want to use on this next role that they're playing. So now we bring in something like AI, and just go ahead and put in the chat really quickly. Is it a threat or a strategy for us as interculturalists? What do you think? Just type it in there. I'm just curious to see. Both? Oh yeah, you can put both too. There is a third option. Yes. I love it. Yeah. So you might be surprised to hear me say, I think it's a strategy. I don't actually think it's a threat. And we'll get to that in a little bit because I really want to give people a chance to get into breakout rooms. And I'm going to blow through that slide really quickly. So if we could get into breakout rooms, and the two topics, and I'll put them into the chat, maybe set it for about 7 minutes to discuss what AI tools you might already be using in your training. And let's go out there and think about all the things that we would like to have as an AI tool. So if we could go into breakout rooms from there, I assume.
Okay, yeah, just creating them now.
Thank you so much, Peter. Peter's doing it and putting folks in rooms, and I will put these in the chat and then we'll come back. All right. Well, I hope that was some fun. So let's just open it up here. I just brought up a slide that just has some types of AI ideas here, but let's hear what you had to say in your chats. What types of AI tools are people using, if they are, and what would they like to see? Just go ahead, shout it out, or put it in the chat. Chat GPT, yeah, common one.
I think we talked about, a couple of things. One thing was the environmental issues of using AI and feeling like, how do we, kind of rectify some of that? And then the other thing we talked about was using it. How are we using it as a tool? And we talked about ChatGPT and Claude and rewriting emails and how we can train AI in certain ways to actually have that cultural voice. So to say, hey, no, that's not actually how I would say that to this person. This is how I would say it. And then have ChatGPT then repeat it back to you to rephrase how they would do that from a cultural lens.
Yeah. I'm curious, what is people's experience with, oh, sorry, Claire?
Oops.
Oops, that's okay. I'm curious, how good of training do you think AI is? How receptive to being trained has it been in your experience? Me, I agree. DeepSeek when I want a Chinese angle. I like that. Yeah. There is, okay, so this is great. I love this. Don't forget to, download the chat before you log off today. We'll keep it open for a little bit in case you're looking for ideas, because there's a ton of tools out there. I mean, obviously, I just grabbed a slide and put something on it. I use Copilot internally at Serva. It's a closed system, so it does theoretically train on our things. It's nice when I want to get a slide like this and I just ask my Copilot to give me this, and it goes out into my environment, right? And it says, here's some things that we're using within Serva. So, it's, and I agree with the, Renata, just confused about the pivot from trainer modalities to AI. So here's what I would say. I think it's a good question. I maybe didn't do context matters right, didn't frame it up right. But I think, so now we have tools that are telling us that they can be helpful in our training room. So there are AI tools that we can use in similar ways to how we might use technology, right? We might find scenarios or create scenarios using a Copilot, a Chat GPT. We might go out looking for particular visuals to test things with our participants. So those are tools that we might bring into the training room. And then there's also that big, burdening question, which I think is why many people have said that, AI is both a threat and a strategy, is that can AI sort of take over some of our role, some of the things that we do as trainers. And so that's kind of the, kind of where I see this progression, or kind of the spectrum of tools plus and what we do and where AI fits into that. Believe it or not, yes, I know you heard me say, I was in Lanzhou in the 90s, so I've been around a while. But I also remember the dot-com bust in the 90s, right? Because the internet.com, that was the way of the future. Now we have AI. What does that mean? We thought the internet was the be all end all. Is AI the be all end all in our field? What does that all mean? So there's kind of some tricky questions, and I think it's helpful for us to just kind of see what other people might be using and how they're using it. So I appreciate that folks are putting that into the chat, because there's a lot of tools out there. Hopefully every tool that you're using comes up with the little, note at the bottom that says AI, may not be accurate, but that's a tricky thing too, because, especially if we create a visual. I was working with a trainer who did this recently and pulled up a visual that he had used through Midjourney and had pulled out different sort of types of cultural representations in people. That's kind of tricky, right? We need to be really careful about how we use that. Are we using that as a stereotype? Is this accurate? Is it an accurate representation of something right now? So we know there's dangers with using some of this, and yet it can be very helpful tools. And sort of, just because I know we're coming right up to the top of the hour, and Suzanne, I see you're given a list of best usage. So I want to pull this list off, because I think it'll be helpful, and we can kind of pull it off and collate it and put it out there for folks. So I'll take a note on that. But as we recipes, I like it. Yes, we all need a good recipe for our AI. Just as we wrap up here with a couple minutes left to go, I do think there are AI chat simulations that we can use. There are coaching simulations that I've tried using that can really refine and hone my speech as a coach. So that's been an interesting thing to try just for my own skilling, but I think it's also an interesting thing that we can, in the not too near future, begin to employ with people who are in our training room. Helping understand the plot of a Netflix series. Yes, Netflix series are getting more complicated. I agree. I need some understanding there. I don't know that virtual reality is really being used in intercultural just yet, but perhaps there's a business opportunity for someone who wants to go more into that, where we're really kind of interacting more in that world. And then I do think, with agentic and generative AI, as we look at, really that virtual exchange kind of thing, that's something that's being developed. And I know Siatar has talked a little bit about that. But lastly, I want to just pull this up and why I think AI is a strategy and it's not a threat. The first couple of things are, fairly easy on this slide. It does enhance, training accessibility for folks. You can get on LinkedIn, you can get content for free. Maybe you see that as a threat as in your own practice, but I just don't think it is, because it's just not that good. Obviously, you can get data-driven personalization, but I think what is so important is that, when we get into this aspect of what AI can do to assist us as trainers, but that we can then be more free to really focus on meaningful, value-added conversations. And I think this is really where it ties back into those modalities. We need to have those modalities in place and probably a few other things in order to really get into that meaningful conversation with people. But lastly, I just want to leave us with, kind of, this is my take. I think, you as an interculturalist, you're the most important asset in the training room. You are unique. You bring perspectives that are really honed through all of the things that we know in our frameworks and our theories as interculturalists. We read the chemistry in the room. We know when someone's frustrated or annoyed because of their body language. We see it with our own eyes, and we can see it in a snap. It doesn't have to be processed anywhere and thought about. We just know it. We can sense, the fear, the hesitation. We can sense when someone's super excited, or someone's really longing for something. We feel that so immediately in the room. And really at this point, AI is really lacking that ability for that subtlety and nuance. So I think that, as interculturalists, we have those things and those skills that fit up so neatly into all these different modalities. So I'll leave us there. We're at the top of the hour, but thank you everyone for all your thoughts and your interactions. A lot of fun today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you all on the 18th.
Take it easy, everyone.